Story at number 10, we have God shows Moses his back, and this is found in the book of Exodus chapter 33 verses 18 to 23. God and prophet Moses, they are known to have direct communication throughout many of the early sections of the Jewish Bible. Moses asks God to reveal his glory, but God warns that anyone who views his divine face will pass away. So God covers Moses' face with his hands and passes by and only shows Moses his back. The story at number 9 involves the sun and the moon standing still, and this is taken from the book of Joshua chapter 10 verses 12 to 14. God responds to our prayer by making the sun and moon just completely stop so that Joshua could continue a major battle during daytime. Now, to quote some of the passage, it goes as follows. So the sun stood still in the midst of heaven and did not hasten to go down for about a whole day. And there has been no day like that, before it and after it, that the Lord heeded the voice of a man, for the Lord fought for Israel. The story at number 8 involves a talking donkey. We find this in the book of Numbers 22 verses 21 to 34. A man by the name of Balaam was summoned by a king to go and curse his enemies, but God sent an angel to block the road. Only Balaam's donkey was able to see the angel, and he got scared, so it tries to avoid the angel, and Balaam's foot gets crushed on some walls beside them because they were riding through a narrow path at the time. And the angel doesn't leave, so the donkey lies down, it's not moving, it's really scared, and Balaam gets frustrated. He starts beating the donkey a total of 3 times, and then the donkey starts to speak to him and says, "Am I not your own donkey which you have always ridden? Have I been in the habit of doing this to you?" And Balaam responds, he says, "No." And finally, he's able to see the angel himself and realizes that going and cursing his enemies is not a good idea at all. The story number 7 involves a Babylonian king, Nebuchadnezzar, who ends up eating grass. And this story can be found in the book of Daniel chapter 4. It concludes in verses 33. King Nebuchadnezzar was the king of Babylon, and he viewed himself as all-powerful. So God decided to put Nebuchadnezzar in his place by making him think that he was a cow. Yeah, a beast of the field. So Nebuchadnezzar, he goes mad. He starts to go out into the fields. He's eating grass. His hair is growing out. His nails are growing out. And this lasts for 7 years. And after 7 years, he finally regains his sanity, and he's humble out of this whole process. So he ends up worshiping God in the end. Pillar of salt comes in at number 6. Now it concludes in Genesis chapter 19 verses 26, but leading up to that passage, we read a story where God has reached his limit of mercy with the 2 cities of Sodom and Gomorrah, and he's sending judgment on those cities. Now Lot, who's the nephew of the great prophet Abraham, is warned by angels to flee to safety with his family. As Lot and his family are leaving, they are warned to not look back at all. Just keep on going, don't look back. Unfortunately though, his wife looks back and she instantly becomes a pillar of salt. Halfway in, the story at number 5 is found in the book of 1 Kings chapter 20 verses 35 to 38. Now, there was a prophet who was planning to disguise himself as a wounded person, and he had asked someone who was accompanying him to strike him and wound him with his weapon. But the companion refused to do so. So the prophet, who was speaking on behalf of God, looked at his companion and said that since he refused to obey the word of the Lord, well, a lion is going to come and eat him. And that's what happens when the prophet leaves. Now, the prophet found another person and asked him to do the exact same thing, strike him and wound him with his weapon. And that person ends up listening, and his life is spared. Story number 4 is found in the book of 2 Kings chapter 2 verses 23 to 24. Elisha, who is the successor of the prophet Elijah, was walking along the road to Bethel when a group of 42 young boys ran up to him, and as kids do, they started to taunt him because he had a bald head, and they were saying things like, "Get out of here, baldy." So he looked at the boys, he cursed them in the name of the Lord, and 2 bears came out of the woods and ate those children, just like that. And Elisha continues on his way. Snakes on a staff come in next at number 3, and this is found in the book of Numbers 21 verses 5 to 7. So the people of ancient Israel, they began to get discouraged and their unbelief was kicking in. They started to complain against Moses for bringing them into the wilderness, and they were blaming God for abandoning them. And because of this, they tried to put all the blame on Moses. And as a punishment against the people, God sent some poisonous serpents into their midst, and they tormented the people, and some people even lost their lives. Now, Moses, he had sympathy and he was praying to God for God to relieve the people of this, and God told him to make a bronze serpent and put it on a staff so that when people looked at it, they were healed, and that's what happened. The story number 2 is a pretty sad one. It's found in the book of Judges chapter 11 verses 29 to 40. When a man of God named Jephthah was in battle, he promised that he would sacrifice to God whatever comes out to greet him when he returns back home. And of course, he was thinking that this would be an animal or something, because animals do that when they see their owners come back. They run out, they bark if it's a dog or whatever. But unfortunately, in his case, it turned out to be his daughter who first greeted him. And he voiced his grief and sorrow at the thought of losing his daughter. But his daughter has a surprising reply. She says, well, you made a promise to the Lord, so you gotta do what you gotta do. She does ask, however, for an extension of life for 2 months to be exact, but at the end of those 2 months, she is sacrificed by her father. Now, finally, we end off with a pretty dark one. At number 1, it's found in the book of Judges, chapter 19, verses 22 to 30. A man was traveling with his concubine or mistress and is invited as a guest in another man's home. But there was a gang of men in the town that saw this man enter, and they were really attracted to him. So they started to bang on the door that the man was a guest in and ask for him to be sent out. So the owner of the house begs the men outside to stop banging on the door and leave his male guest alone. But they persist, and the man offers his own daughter to them, also his guest's concubine he offers for the men outside. But the gang of men, they still keep on begging for the male guest. So they end up pushing out the male guest's concubine outside of the house to satisfy the gang of men. Now, the gang of men, they do all sorts of indescribably horrible things to her all night until morning. And when the male guest finds her in the morning, she's on the ground in front of the home. She passed away. He takes her home on his donkey, and then he proceeds to chop her body up into 12 pieces, which he sends to the various different parts of ancient Israel to show people how evil they have become. At number 10, we have the Dybuks. A Dybuk is a disembodied evil spirit that, due to its sins when it was alive, it wanders aimlessly until it finds a body of a living person. And when it finds a body, that's when it possesses the new body's soul, and it creates a separate personality inside that person and causes a whole lot of mental illness. Now, people with nervous disorders were taken to a rabbi who believed he could actually cast out the Dybuk through an exorcism. Number 9 brings us Asmodeus. According to Zoroastrian and Jewish legend, Asmodeus is the prince of demons, and he appears in the book of Tobit, one of the ancient Jewish religious books, where he torments a woman named Sarah. Now, let's just hold on for a minute, guys. I'm just thinking, why is it that when it comes to horror movies and scary stories, there's always a Sarah getting tormented or killed? Should I be worried, though? My wife is named Sarah. Okay, Asmodeus. If you're watching this, back up. I'm warning you. Don't mess with me. As the legend goes, Sarah was married to 7 men in succession, and Asmodeus slays each husband on their wedding night. Sarah's 8th husband, Tobias, ends up outsmarting Asmodeus on his wedding night, and he enjoyed a long marriage with her. Moving on to number 8, we have Golem. The myth of the golem originates in the idea that human beings might be able to form living creatures from clay, just like Adam was formed from clay by God. The most famous golem is the one made by Jewish mystic and philosopher Rabbi Judah Leo, who was the Maharal of Prague, who inscribed a clay man with the word emet, meaning truth, and then he spoke the divine name and brought him to life. The golem protected the Jewish community from persecution, but ended up becoming too difficult to control. It became very dangerous, so the rabbi just decided to erase the first letter of the word emet, leaving the word met, which means dead. Number 7 brings us Leviathan. Now, Leviathan is this massive sea creature, and the Leviathan is referenced throughout the Hebrew Bible, and according to tradition, it was created by God at the beginning of time. Now, Leviathan has a counterpart, which is a land creature, and that creature is known as Behemoth. And in some versions of the legend, Leviathan is the female mate of Behemoth. Leviathan is often an embodiment of chaos, and it threatens to eat those who are damned. There's also a Jewish legend that says that in the Messianic era, the Leviathan will be killed and the righteous people will end up eating its flesh. Number 6 brings us to the fiery flying serpent. The fiery flying serpent is mentioned by the prophet Isaiah in the Bible, and the term translated as fiery serpent, seraph, appears in the book of Isaiah to signify the seraphim, and the singular of seraphim is seraph. Isaiah also sees them in a vision, each of them having 6 wings, and they flew in the presence of God. But the term fiery serpent in other contexts is also mentioned. In the book of Numbers, the Israelites, they start to complain about not having enough food and water, so God sends fiery serpents to attack them. But the Israelites, they end up begging for forgiveness, so God tells Moses to put a copper serpent figure on top of a rod, and anyone that looks on the rod, they will recover. So we see that the full scope of the fiery serpent's abilities is shrouded in mystery, making it all the more scary. Halfway in at number 5, we have Mazakin. The Mazakin are invisible demons that pester individuals. Mazakin, they are lower level demons though, and they're actually types of demons that you can encounter in your daily life. They don't necessarily do much harm because they rarely possess people, but they tend to only attack if they are angry or they're just generally unhappy. Rather than try to get rid of them, they say the best thing to do is just learn to live with them. Either way, if it makes itself visible, yeah, that's definitely going to send some chills up your spine. The being at number 4 is the Nephilim. According to one interpretation of the book of Genesis chapter 6 in the Hebrew Bible, in the early generations of humanity, there were some divine beings that became very attracted to human women, that they came down and they ended up mating with them. And then the offspring that they produced are known as the Nephilim. These semi-divine giants, they roamed the earth for generations and they tormented people. But what happened to them after that? Well, nobody knows for sure. The being at number 3 is the Shamir. The Shamir is a supernatural being with power to cut through stone, iron, and diamond. It's mentioned throughout the Talmud, and the Shamir was created right before the first Shabbat or Sabbath, just as God finished creation. It's said that Moses used it to engrave gemstones in the high priest's breastplate, and King Solomon also commissioned a search to find one for the use in the construction of the temple. And the Shamir is said to have lost its powers though at the first temple's destruction. The scary being at number 2 is Lilith. In Jewish lore, Lilith is a female demonic figure and was actually the first woman ever created before Eve. She was feared because she was believed to slay women in childbirth and steal their babies. She was also known for her uncontrollable sexuality. She would force men to sleep with her, and she did this just so that she can get pregnant and give birth to produce more demonic offsprings. The creature we're going to end off at number 1 is the Estries. Estries are a type of vampiric being who also take on a female form. Mentioned in Sefer Hasidim, Estries preyed on Jewish citizens and had to drink blood to stay alive. Estries could also fly if their hair was unbound, but binding their hair would stop them from flying. And these beings are very hard to get rid of. It is believed that burying them isn't enough to get rid of them. No, you needed to pack its mouth with dirt and then bury it, or you could also decapitate it or burn it. Starting at number 10, we have Elohim. Angels within the Elohim are known for their commitment to victory of good over evil. And there's one famous archangel, Haniel, who leads the Elohim according to Kabbalah, which again is a mystical branch of Judaism. Now, it may come as a surprise since Elohim is a name used for God according to the Hebrew Bible, but the term can also be translated as angels based on the context. Number 9 brings us the Ophanim. Members of the Ophanim rank of angels never, ever sleep because they're constantly busy guarding God's throne up in heaven. And they're also known for their wisdom. Their name comes from the Hebrew word ophan, which means wheel, and this is due to their description inside of the Hebrew Bible, specifically in the book of Ezekiel, especially in the first chapter, because they're described as spirits that have their spirits encased in a wheel that move along with them. So when they move, the wheel moves with them. Now in Kabbalah, the famous archangel Raziel leads the Ophanim. The next type of angel we're going to look at number 8 is the Erelim. Now these angels are known for their courage and understanding. The famous archangel Sathkiel, he leads the Erelim in Kabbalah. Sathkiel, now that's a pretty interesting word, even the spelling of it. Well, that word there means knowledge of God, and the archangel Sathkiel is known as the angel of understanding and compassion. Next up at number 7, we're looking at the Hashmalim. Now the Hashmalim are known for their love as well as their grace and their kindness. And the archangel Zadkiel, a very popular archangel in Judaism, he leads this rank of angels according to Kabbalah. Zadkiel is thought to be the angel of the Lord as described throughout the Old Testament of the Bible, who shows a lot of mercy and kindness, especially in Genesis chapter 22 of the Torah when the prophet Abraham is preparing to sacrifice his son Isaac. Next, I want to look at the Malachim. Members of the Malachim rank of angels are known for their beauty and mercy. Now in Kabbalah, their famous archangel Raphael leads this class of angels. Throughout this video, you might start recognizing certain names for angels, whether it's from the Protestant Christian belief or Catholicism. Getting back into the list, at number 5, we have the Beni Elohim. The Beni Elohim, they focus a lot of their work on giving God all of the glory, all of the praise. Now in Kabbalah, it says that the famous archangel Michael leads this rank of angels. Michael is mentioned in major religious texts more than any other named angel, and he's often shown as a warrior who fights for what's right to bring glory to God. As a matter of fact, when you break down the name Michael in Hebrew, Mikael, that means one who is like God, and in some translations it translates to who is like God in a question format. Now in the book of Daniel chapter 12 in the Hebrew Bible, it describes Michael as being the great prince who will protect God's people even during the struggles between good and evil at the end of time. The Ashim come next at number 4. Now the Ashim is a rank of angels that is the closest to human beings. The Ashim focus on building God's kingdom here on earth. Now in the Kabbalah faith, their leader is the archangel Sandalphon. And not only are these angels closely associated with human beings, but their class is also the closest level to the human beings in terms of power and wisdom and abilities. Seraphim coming at number 3. I'm sure you guys probably have heard of this one before. Seraphim angels are known for their work for justice. Now the Kabbalah says that the famous archangel Chamuel leads the seraphim rank. Now the Hebrew Bible records a vision of the prophet Isaiah that had seraphim angels near to God in heaven. And the passage says, above him were 6 seraphim, each with 6 wings. With 2 wings they covered their face, with 2 wings they covered their feet, and with 2 wings they were flying. And they were calling to one another, holy, holy, holy is the Lord Almighty. The whole earth is full of his glory. And you can find that from the book of Isaiah chapter 6 verses 2 to 3. Next up at number 2, a very popular angelic rank, cherubim, not just in Christianity or Judaism, but also in other various New Age beliefs as well. The cherubim angels are known known for their work helping people with the sin that separates them from God so that they can draw closer to God. Now, the archangel Gabriel leads the cherubim according to Kabbalah. Gabriel is mentioned numerous times in Christianity as well as in the religion of Islam. But in Judaism, though, the cherubim angels first appear in the Torah, and they pop up right after humans brought sin into the world while they were in the Garden of Eden. And the passage in the book of Genesis goes as follows. After God drove the man out, he placed on the east side of the Garden of Eden cherubim and a flaming sword flashing back and forth to guard the way of the tree of life. And you can find that in the book of Genesis chapter 3 verses 24. The Chayot HaKodesh comes in at number 1. Now, the first and the highest type of angels is called the Chayot HaKodesh. Now, they are known for their enlightenment, as well as they're responsible for holding up God's throne and also for holding earth in its proper position in outer space. The Chayot HaKodesh, they really emanate a very powerful light, and they often appear like they're covered up in fire. The famous archangel Metatron leads the Chayot HaKodesh, not to be confused, by the way, with Megatron from Transformers. Maybe that's where they got the name from, thinking about it now. But either way, that belief is most commonly taught in the mystical branch of Judaism known as Kabbalah.